The Madderahs of York, Part 2 of 4. Thomas Madderah. Brothers William and Thomas Madderah caused trouble when they were together, but Thomas was also capable of causing trouble without his brother's help. Street robbery, August 1828. On a Saturday night, early in August, stonemason Benjamin Farrar was drinking at the Lord Nelson pub in Jubbergate. By midnight he was very intoxicated, and he had acquired two new friends, Joseph Mortimer and Thomas Madderah. He could barely walk, so Mortimer and Madderah said they would see him home. The trio left the pub with Farrar supported between the two more sober men. Late on Sunday morning, a very hungover Farrar realized he had been robbed of 10 shillings, 2 knives, and a silk handkerchief. Returning to the pub, he saw there a young man named Warren, whom he recalled seeing in the street outside the pub the previous evening as he was being helped home. Warren described how he had followed the 3 men onto Castlegate, where he saw Mortimer turn out Farrar's pockets. The police were notified, and within a short while Mortimer and Madderah were taken into custody. On August 16th, the case went before the Lord Mayor of York. Warren deposed what he claimed to have witnessed and said there was another man with him who could corroborate this account. He did not know the man's name, but thought he could find him. The Lord Mayor postponed proceedings 1 week to give him time to find the unnamed witness, but he could not be found, and the case was eventually dismissed. Assaulting the patrol, April 1829. With his brother William sitting in York Castle jail, waiting to be transferred first to a prison hulk and then onwards to the penal colony in Australia, we might expect Thomas to reflect on his own precarious position. Clearly, William's previous history of offences had influenced the court's decision to inflict such a harsh sentence, and Thomas had much the same history. Yet he does not appear to have been deterred in the slightest. On Sunday, April 19th, Thomas was released from the House of Correction. Why he was in there and how long he had been there is not known, as details do not appear to have been reported in the local newspaper. 9 days later, a police patrol, acting on a report of suspicious activity, entered a private yard containing carriages belonging to Messrs. Cattle and Maddocks. There they found Thomas and another man, William Brown, also recently released from jail, sleeping in one of the carriages. When pulled from the coach, William reacted violently, kicking the feet out from under P.C. Robinson and jumping with his knees onto the prone officer's chest. It took several officers to subdue him and secure him. They appeared in court the following day, charged with vagrancy and assault. They were each fined 20 shillings, which is equivalent to around £120 in 2025 terms. But, having no money, they were imprisoned for 28 days with hard labour. Drunk and disorderly, April 1830. On the night of Tuesday, April 27th, 1830, the City Patrol found 4 men lying on the ground in Newgate in a state of intoxication. The parish constable was called and took the 4 men, Thomas Madderah, William Robinson, William Trenham, and John Waterworth, into custody. They appeared before the magistrates on Thursday and were each fined 5 shillings, but, being unable to pay, they were all sent to the House of Correction. Stealing a neck of pork, December 1832. Mr. Jewett was a butcher in the Shambles. A few years ago he had been robbed by William Madderah. Now he reported to the police that on Christmas Day morning a lady called Mary Thackeray stole from his shop a neck of pork weighing around 5 pounds. Police constables Robinson and Silverside went to Thackeray's house that evening and found Thackeray, Thomas Madderah, and a man called John Fentiman about to sit down for supper. On the table was a large quantity of pork, with more pork in a cupboard and yet more in a frying pan. Robinson entered the house while Silverside remained outside. He told Thackeray she must return the meat to Mr. Jewett, and she made to gather it up. Suddenly a knife flashed through the air, past Robinson's head. Madderah then leapt at him, striking him about his ear and on his nose. Fentiman also punched and kicked him violently. Before Silverman could get inside to assist his colleague, Madderah and Fentiman had bundled Robinson out through the door, slammed it shut, and bolted it. Arrests were eventually made the following day, by which time the meat had disappeared. All three were committed to trial at the York Epiphany Sessions on January the 4th, where the two men were found guilty of assaulting P.C. Robinson and were each sentenced to serve 12 months with hard labour. Thackeray was found guilty of felony and sentenced to be transported for 7 years. Break-in at the Wellington pub, May 1834. In the early hours of Sunday, May the 4th, 1834, Thomas Madderah and Robert Rawdon pried open the kitchen door of the Wellington public house in Goodrumgate. Once inside, they stole the pub's cash float and a £1/4 of tobacco. Perhaps showing a twisted sense of humour, they left a halfpenny coin in the cash drawer and cut a hole in one of the landlord's hats before making their getaway. Later that same morning, Benjamin Burton, a local farmer, informed the York Constabulary that there had been a break-in at his cottage near Huntingdon, a mile to the north of York. The cottage was currently undergoing some significant repairs, making it temporarily unsuitable for living in. Benjamin and his wife were staying in York while the work was underway, and consequently the property stood vacant overnight. But the farm still had to be worked, so Benjamin had been there the previous day until around 9 o'clock in the evening. Jane kept the cottage's larder stocked so Benjamin could eat there during the day. She had recently left 3 pounds of beef and a quantity of bread in the larder. When Benjamin arrived at the cottage early on the morning of May the 4th, he found the keyhole of the door was stuffed with wood shavings. When he finally managed to clear the lock and gain entrance, he immediately saw signs of intruders. The table was set as if 3 people had been getting dinner, and breadcrumbs were scattered around the table and floor. He also noticed a pane of glass had been removed from a window at the rear of the cottage, this apparently being how his unwelcome guests had forced an entry. The York police launched a search of buildings in the vicinity of Benjamin's cottage and quickly found 3 men in the barn of a farm off Burtonstone Lane in Clifton, 3 or 4 fields distance from Benjamin's cottage. Thomas Madderah, Robert Rawdon, and Richard Hicks were smoking pipes in the hayloft of the barn when the police arrived. Police Constable Robinson called up to the men, and Madderah and Rawdon immediately came down from the loft. Hicks attempted to hide under the hay, apparently hoping the police would be fooled into thinking only Madderah and Rawdon were present, but a search of the loft quickly revealed his hiding place. All 3 men were arrested and taken to the House of Correction in York. Madderah, Rawdon, and Hicks appeared before Magistrate the Reverend Cura on Saturday, May the 17th, charged with robbing the Wellington pub and the cottage of Benjamin Burton. They were committed for trial at the next North Riding Sessions. Northallerton, June the 30th, 1834. North Riding Sessions. Mr. Blanchard, for the prosecution, laid out the facts of the case and presented to the jury various items found in the possession of the accused: a tobacco pouch, a waistcoat, a neck handkerchief, a pair of scissors, a razor, 3 pounds of beef, and some bread. Mr. Cowton, a grocer in York, was called as a witness. He identified the tobacco pouch as an item he had sold to Mr. Mountain, the proprietor of the Wellington pub, shortly before the break-in at said establishment. Benjamin Burton's wife, Jane, testified that she had left 3 pounds of beef and a quantity of bread in the cottage the day before the break-in, and that it was gone the following day. She also identified the waistcoat, handkerchief, scissors, and razor as items taken from the cottage. William Inglis, a butcher of York, testified that he knew the accused and had seen Madderah and Rawdon close by Burton's cottage the day before the break-in. The defence for 17-year-old Richard Hicks maintained that he had not been present at the Wellington pub nor at Burton's cottage, and had simply met the men on the road and had joined them to smoke. After a short deliberation, the jury acquitted Hicks and found Madderah and Rawdon guilty. When the verdict was announced, Madderah said, "Thank you, gentlemen. I am very much obliged." This show of bravado probably indicated that he expected yet another short prison term, a prospect that did not seem to concern him too much. But he was not getting off lightly this time. The judge commented that the discipline of previous spells in the House of Correction had obviously failed to have any effect on them, so they were both, therefore, sentenced to be transported for 7 years. He went on to say that both men had been a problem for the city and their removal was a public benefit. Australia bound. On August 16th, Thomas was transferred to the prison hulks at Portsmouth. After a few days on a receiving hulk, where he was washed, inspected for disease, and issued with clothing, blankets, and a mess mug and plate, he was transferred to the hulk Leviathan. While waiting for a convict transport vessel to become available, he was assigned to a work gang and would spend 10 to 12 hours a day labouring ashore on various projects such as river cleaning, timber cutting, embankment and dockyard work. Some convicts sentenced to transportation actually spent their entire sentence on board a hulk and were released back into English society upon completion of their term. But Thomas was not that lucky. On September the 27th, he embarked on the transport ship Augusta Jessie, bound for Van Diemen's Land, modern-day Tasmania. The vessel, with 210 convicts aboard, arrived in Van Diemen's Land on January the 22nd, 1835. In the register of newly arrived criminals, Thomas is described as being 5 foot 6 inches tall, with brown hair, blue eyes, and dark brown eyebrows. His complexion was fresh, his nose long, his mouth large. He had a scar above his right eyebrow. He was assigned as a farm labourer to a free settler named B. Horn, and was still a convict in 1839. What happened to him after that date is impossible to tell.